we can say that this harkens back to some of the illusions of 1973 and 1974. Who has the president's back this morning?
Well, I think that the great story this morning, after his worst day as president by far, we don't have time to talk about all the things that went wrong for him yesterday, but the big story, Tom, is that he can still manipulate the news cycle and announce things that are market-friendly. The One China deal reduces threats of a trade war with China. The Abe will talk about new jobs in the U.S., and Trump once again said tax cuts are going to come quickly. They're not, but that's catnip for the markets when they hear stuff like that.
What will Senate Majority Leader McConnell talk about today after the way Senator McCain was treated yesterday? Does the president begin to lose senators and at the margin people in the House?
Not yet. I still think
Agreed.
It's a ways off. I think the rebellion is confined to 4 or 5 Republican senators, but I do think there's got to be a come-to-Jesus meeting where they all agree on a plan going forward. And right now, after the court ruling, things look pretty chaotic.
Greg, help me here with basic civics. What I notice here, forgetting about the politics and who's for this, who's for that, there's just basic gaps in working knowledge of how our government works. Do you agree with that, or is that just too far?
Well, at the same time, Tom, I think political capital is crucial. Trump still has it from his base. His base will love to hear about Japanese jobs in the U.S. His base will love to hear about tax cuts, so he still can manipulate that base. When you look a little deeper and get into the trenches, I think any talk of a quick tax bill or any kind of legislation is ludicrous. This is going to be a very long slog.
Greg, talk to me about what, I guess, being very loyal to the base does for the American economy. And who does President Trump need to get on side to make sure that these reflationary expectations come to fruition?
Well, I think it's going to take time. I think it's going to take a lot of work with the House, and I agree with your correspondent's comments earlier. The House Ways and Means Committee will begin work on a tax bill by the end of February. That's a good story for the markets. Unfortunately, the Senate is glacial.
All right, where do you think that President Trump goes from here? Does he need to recenter a little bit, I guess, refocus, try to unify the country, at least to try to unify politicians around him? And who does he listen to get the cues?
Well, 2 comments. Number one, he still has the votes in Congress. We can't overlook the fact that he's probably going to get every one of his cabinet nominees through. The other thing I'd say, though, is that he needs to perhaps get his advisors all on the same page. I think this idea of a chaotic White House with all sorts of different views is not a good story.
Right. Talk to me about conflicts of interest. So we had Kellyanne Conway yesterday talking about buying Ivanka's stuff after the president tweeted that it was unfair that Nordstrom stopped selling her clothes and accessories. Are there checks and balances in place? Will he change that tone? Will his advisors regroup and rethink?
Yeah, I think he's going to have to. And, we haven't even talked about another huge issue. National Security Director Flynn apparently talked to the Russians about sanctions before the inauguration. So there's going to be a lot of very damaging stories, but I think that those stories appeal to a narrow circle. I think the bigger story is, can he get his agenda done? And on that score, he still does have a lot of votes.
But come on, Greg, the knives are out. 9 sources tell the Washington Post that General Flynn had a conversation with the Russians on sanctions. I get the dirt. I get the inside the Beltway stuff. Where is the check and balance or process in the legislature to review General Flynn's discussions with the Russians?
Well, I think the big story, Tom, coming out of yesterday's court ruling is that this now is an incentive for the judiciary to become activist. And I think on many fronts, you're going to see a court system get a lot more aggressive with this administration.